Hello friends, I welcome you all to this session of a compulsory English. In the last session, we have started discussing about script writing for radio and television. We have already read this introductory part of this unit and we try to understand what is the difference between writing, radio script writing and writing for a print media, and what is the difference between writing for a television media. So if we chronologically arrange these three script writing skills, you can understand that news writing for a print media is easier than the writing for a radio, and writing for radio is easier than the writing for the television, because the television media always is accompanied with a visual images. Radio is meant for the reading aloud, uh, or for the audiences, it is for the listening purpose. And writing for a print media, you can say it is written for the readers. So this is the difference between these three scripts: script for a print media, script for a radio broadcasting, or script for a television show. So we have we have read all these things in fact. And now let us read this news, difference between news for the newspaper and news for the radio. What is the basic difference between these two things? See, news for the newspaper, the first difference between these two is news in the newspaper is meant for silent reading. Of course, yes, it is meant for the silent reading, and reader will read it. We are only supposed to publish it in the newspaper. We are not supposed to read it aloud for the audience, or it is not meant to uh, we are not supposed to give a critical commentary with the uh, item that we are supposed to publish in the newspaper, news item that we are supposed to publish in a newspaper. So this is the news for a newspaper, where we are supposed to write it, and the readers are supposed to listen it, silently read it. See the difference in news for the newspaper and news for the radio. News broadcast on the radio is intended to be heard. So this is the basic difference between these two things. That is news for the newspaper and news for the radio. News for the newspaper is meant for silent reading. However, news for the radio meant for the loud reading, or heard by the audience. This is the basic difference between. Then the news items in a newspaper are divided into headlines, lead, and the main point. Of course, yes, we have also learned about how to write a news item. So these news items is always divided into three parts. First part is a headline. Headline is meant to attract the readers towards them, attract, make them understand, or make them read the news item. Then after headline we have a lead, that is the main, that is the introductory for the context and the main points. However, in radio you can see radio news begins with the headlines followed by detailed news. This is what you can see is about the news for the radio. See the third difference between these two things. The first, the headline can be incomplete sentence with the omission of articles. Of course, yes, you can see headlines. We have also learned how to write an headlines. I think in the first year you all were introduced with the media writing, and in that situation we have also learned how to write a headlines. So headlines published in a newspaper are incomplete sentences with omissions of articles. So the writer of the news for newspaper assume that these gaps, these omissions will be filled by the reader. So see the difference in news. What is the difference in news for the radio on this point? The headline must be in complete sentence. So here the reader for the radio broadcasting, he is using headlines with a complete sentence. He is not using incomplete sentence. He is using a complete sentence. He is not assuming anything. He is not supposing that his audience will fill the gap. Instead of that, he very clearly uh, broadcasting the headlines in a complete sentence. Then the fourth one. The reader can go back to the news report if she he has missed or failed to understand or grasp the matter. So this is the facility available in the print media. If you miss to understand the things, you can go back to the newspaper and read it. However, in the radio media, you can see ephemeral nature of the oral message on the radio, the details of the news read on radio are not repeated. Only the important headlines are repeated at the end of the news. If the listener misses a point, it is difficult to retrieve the same. So this is what the difference between newspaper and radio. Then the use of lengthy sentences in a news report may not make any significance different to the reader. So they can read it again and again, and they may try to understand the meaning, or they can make the meaning out of it by reading again and again. So lengthy sentences you can use in a news writing for the print media. However, in radio, you can see the announcers has to read the news with appropriate speed, using short words and simple sentences. So this is what the difference. So in print media, you can write lengthy sentences. It do not make any significant difference to the readers. However, as the news broadcasted on a radio meant to heard by the people, it announcer should use short sentence speed, read it with the appropriate speed, and use short words and simple sentences. So this is the difference between radio and again print media. Then sixth difference. The news item is made effective by using headlines in the bold and visual like photographs. Of course, yes, you can see when you see the first page of the newspaper, you can see it is in a color. Most of the newspapers use a red color if the news is very important. They may use different colors even. So uh, make it bold, make it italic. So all these facilities were available with a print media. We can do it. If we want to emphasize certain things, we can bold it. If we want to suggest that it is referred by from someone else, you can italize it. So this is what the facility is available. Such a kind of facility is available with the print media, which is not available with the radio media. So see, there is no scope to use support material like audio visual clips to aid either the news reader or the listeners. So this is what is the difference. Then the seventh difference: punctuation marks are used to bring clarity in communication of a meaning. Of course, as it is a written material, punctuation marks were used to bring a clarity in the communication of meaning. However, in a radio, you can see a news reader on the radio has to depend on the very short pauses. You can't take a long pauses when you are speaking on a radio. Every minute is counted with money. So as a result of that, you can see you should have a very short pauses to make or to bring clarity in the communication of meaning. So this is the difference between a print media and a radio broadcast. Then in news report, passive voice is used. In news report, passive voice is used. However, in a radio, news are presented in active voice. So passive voice and active voice. Then ninth one. In newspapers, attribution, that is he said, follows the quote and is generally at the end of the sentence, as in the example given below. See the how the other persons were quoted here. The sport boys are paid too less in film industry, a senior government economist said last night. So in the end of at the end of the sentence, it is said that who whose opinion this is. However, in the radio broadcasting, you can see as the listener need to know the speaker, attribution in the radio news is at the front of a sentence, as in the following example. See, a senior government economist says that sport boys in film industry are paid too less. This is what the difference between radio broadcasting and writing for a print media. So I think you have learned these two things. It is not very difficult to understand, but very easy to note the differences between two. So now let's see the structure of a radio script. See, almost every word presented on a radio or a television is written beforehand. Of course, yes. We have to prepare it first and then present it on the radio, then present it on a television. So it should be written before it. We have to write the script before we read aloud on the radio. We have to write a script before we present it on a television. So the presentation on the radio or television is written beforehand, and it is prepared very professionally. It is prepared. So just like any writing process, script writing includes developing an idea, outline, research, selection of material, sequencing of points, message planning, etc. So all these things are common in every writing. You can see developing an idea, or uh, it is even for the news uh, that is published in a print media. The same thing we can have: developing an idea, outline, research, selection of material, sequencing of points, message, planning, etc. So care should be taken to include all the relevant information in the script. The script for any radio program is mainly divided into three important parts: introduction, background information, and conclusion. Of course, yes, and this is the same with the news media also. There is always the introduction, there is always the background information, and there is always the conclusion. So, introduction is meant to seek immediate attention of the listeners. It is followed by important information. In the last part, the matter is summed up. So this is what is the structure of the radio script. So it is divided into three parts. First is introduction, second is a background information, and third is a conclusion. So introduction is meant to seek immediate attention of the listeners. The following followed by important information, that is the background information, and in the last part it is summed up. So this is what the structure of a radio script, and it is not very different from the script for a television and a script for a print media. Then see the tips for writing a radio script. So first tip is, in order to keep listeners away from rustling of papers, it is essential to type on one side of the paper only with at least 1 inch margin from all sides. The writing should be legible. So this is what we should prepare the script, and this script should be written on one side paper to avoid the rustling of the paper. Otherwise, if we go on rustling of the paper, it may create confusion to us, confusion regarding the reading, and at the same time we also broadcast the sound of rustling of the paper. So to avoid such kind of thing, we have to type it or write it on one side of the paper instead of a double side, only with the least 1 inch margin from all sides, and there should be a 1 inch margin of all sides. And the most important part, that it should be legible. Otherwise, you start reading it and you came across a word that is not legible, then you have to take a gap or you have to take a pause. So this is what is the important thing in script writing for reading. Then second step, see, the selection of a font size and font type should be large enough and easy to read, especially when illegible writing font is 40 and beyond. We use it 40 and beyond, and the line spacing we generally keep here is a 1 and 5, 1.5, that is a 1.5. So this is what we consider it is a legible uh, script for a reading. So the selection of a font size and font type should be large enough and easy to read. Otherwise, we cannot read it very easily. We have to watch it very carefully. And in that situation, the confusion may create when we were reading on the online. This is what is the important thing. This is the second tip. See the third tip. There is also need to leave enough, that is a double space between the lines to avoid confusion. So many times we start reading and we forget that whether we were reading upper line or down line that is written down, and confusion is created. To avoid such a kind of confusion, we should leave enough space, and enough space for the reading is 1.5 and above. So here you have it, this tip has suggested double space. So double space is important to avoid the confusion for the easy reading, to add new information and to mark punctuation, pronunciation of the new words. So if we leave left or leave double space between two lines, we can mention pronunciation there, we can mention certain additional information there. So this is what is the important thing. This is the third tip. Then fourth tip, a radio script should be written to be read aloud. A well-written script should use clear and correct everyday language. So you can see we should use a colloquial language, everyday language. It should be a simple one. It should not be a difficult one. You are not there to show your intelligence. You are not there to show what kind of vocabulary items you know or what kind of structure you have. But you are there to transfer the information to the public, and in that case you are supposed to use simple words, simple sentences, simple pronunciation that may convey very easily your, that will convey your message to the mass. Then the fifth tip, attention should be paid towards a choice of words, their pronunciation and length of sentences, and effective use of a punctuation. So all these things are very important related to the language of the radio script. So you should pay attention to the choice of words, selection of words. It should be a simple one. It should not be a difficult one. Then the pronunciation, because you are supposed to read it loud. So it should, you should pronounce correctly. And then length of sentences. So length of sentences should be a small one. It should not be a lengthy one. Otherwise, it may create a confusion. And effective use of punctuation. So this is the fifth tip that we are supposed to understand. Tips writing for a radio, tips for a radio, writing a radio script. So after tips for radio script writing, let us see some do's and don'ts. So what a script writer should do and what a script writer should not do, should avoid. So we are supposed to read this. See the first do, use words familiar to the listeners. Of course, yes, as I told you, you are not there to show your intelligence, but you are there to transfer the message to the public, and you are not speaking to a very intellectual class, but you are speaking to the mass. It is for everyone, and in that context, familiar word to the listener. Then use of slang or jargon. You should avoid use of slang or jargon. uh, Translate technical words into a simple language. So we should avoid slangs. Or second do is write names of a person's places and loan words in a phonetic script. So you can use it or pronounce it correctly. For that purpose, you have to write it in a phonetic script. Then a repetition of words. You should avoid the repetition of words except names of a foreign cities or persons. So you should avoid the repetition. Then the third is underlying important words to be emphasized. So underline important words to be emphasized. So you should emphasize certain words. Use of pronouns and adjective. Pronouns and adjective. We should avoid use of pronouns and adjectives here, because otherwise it may create a confusion in the minds of the readers or listeners. Then write numbers in words rather than in figures. So while writing script, you should write numbers in words instead of figures. Avoid the abbreviations. So we should avoid the abbreviation because we are supposed to read it aloud. Then use short and simple sentences in the present continuous tense and active voice. So this is what the important tip for you. So you should use simple sentence in the present continuous tense and active voice. And you should avoid ambiguous sentences. So this is what the important thing you should understand. Then use capital letters to mark the words not to be spoken into a microphone, names of characters, directions for the reading lines, music and sound effects for programs other than news reading. So this is what capital letters we should use to mark the words not to be spoken into the microphone. So this is what we have to do this. And the last tip or last to do is indicate pauses using a series of dots. So you can mention pauses with the help of a series of dots. So these are the do's and don'ts. So I think we have already learned about how to write a radio script. Try at your own. You can understand very easily how to write for a radio script. So we will stop here and continue the same in the next session. Thank you for listening.